As you know, on June 14th, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, convened a meeting of the 93 United States attorneys throughout the country to talk about the Summer Crime Initiative. At that meeting, the Attorney General directed us, the United States attorneys, to let the public know what we were doing as the summer months come, and today is the first day of summer. As the summer months come, and as usual in summer months, there's an increase in crime. So we've convened here today to follow the directive of the Attorney General to let this community know, the Rochester community, what we plan to do about a possible surge in the crime rate during the summer months, what we have been doing over the past several months, and what we intend to do together in the partnership between our state, local, and federal law enforcement. Today, I want to introduce to you some of the people standing here with me. To my right is the United States Attorney, Assistant United States Attorney in charge of the Rochester office, Andy Rodriguez. Over here to my left at the end is Assistant United States Attorney Douglas Gregory. We have ATF Assistant Special Agent in charge, Brian I'm sorry, I'm butchering your name. DeJournal. We're gonna go with that. We have Rochester Police Chief Dave Smith, FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge, Jeremy Bell, United States Marshal Chuck Salina. He's not here, okay. I didn't think I saw him. DEA Rochester Resident Agent in charge, Bill Rickard. New York State Police Captain Kevin Kelly. Monroe County Sheriff Officer Major Jeffrey Warren. Monroe County District Attorney's Office First Assistant District Attorney Perry Duckles. And Monroe Crime Analysis Center Director David Phelps. They're all standing here with me today because we are all partnering in ensuring that the summer months in the city of Rochester are safe for the law-abiding citizens who want to enjoy the summer, want to go to parks, play with their children, have cookouts, sit on their porches, enjoy the nice weather without having to be worried about a stray bullet or someone coming and harming them throughout the summer months. Now, needless to say, the crime violence in our communities stem around the gun violence, people using guns to harm each other and often harming innocent people who get in the way. So a lot of the initiative that my office and our law enforcement partners have developed stem around curbing the gun violence. And to that end, I'm going to turn the mic over to Agent AUSA in charge of the Rochester office, Andy Rodriguez, to brief you on some of the initiatives this office has taken over the past several months. Andy.
Thank you, Trini. Good afternoon, folks. Thank you all for being here, and particularly grateful to the men and women in this room from law enforcement who every day are working hard in dangerous conditions to keep us safe. As we all know, unfortunately, for the past several years, Rochester has had some of the highest violence and murder rates in the country. Because of the worsening gun violence problem in Rochester last summer, particularly during the summer months, U.S. Attorney Trini Ross directed me as the attorney in charge of the Rochester U.S. Attorney's Office, and Brett Harvey, who's the head of our narcotics and organized crime section here, to become more proactive in investigating and charging federal gun offenses. Trini Ross hosted a meeting of most of the folks in this office, in this room were there, of the law enforcement leaders in this area, federal, state, and local, to come together and to identify areas where we could enhance our collaboration and areas where we could maybe change our practices to better target gun violence. After discussions with our local law enforcement officers, state and federal, our office, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Rochester, changed the way we handled and did intake on gun arrests. And I want to take you briefly through what we did. The old process used to be that every week, there would be a meeting, usually on Fridays, with ATF, RPD, a representative from the Monroe County District Attorney's Office, and a representative from our office, and we would look at the arrests from the prior week to determine, gun arrests from the prior week, to determine where those cases would be prosecuted, at the U.S. Attorney's Office or at the District Attorney's Office here in Monroe County. And the factor, we looked at various factors, obviously, but one of the key factors we were looking at that time was what jurisdiction had the highest potential sentences on the books. And as a result of that, we, the U.S. Attorney's Office, were deferring to the Monroe County District Attorney's Office and allowing and asking them to prosecute most of the criminal possession of weapons cases and arrests in the area. Monroe County District Attorney's Office has outstanding prosecutors. But what was happening is that many of the people arrested were being released the next day and sometimes that same day. The community was losing faith in the ability of law enforcement to protect them because those arrested were out there. The criminal community was gaining more confidence. They were basically feeling, to some extent, immune because they would be arrested and they'd be on the street right away. And law enforcement was the officers on the beat, in uniform, on the streets, were becoming somewhat demoralized because they were arresting people, seeing them on the streets the next day. So what did we do? We decided, and I credit the FBI for this, frankly. I credit Darren Cox, who is the associate, who is ASAC for FBI, with suggesting that instead of focusing on which jurisdiction had the highest potential sentence, we instead focus on which jurisdiction was best able to keep the defendants detained after arrest. Which jurisdiction was best able to keep the defendants, gun arrests, detained after arrest. And that's what we started doing. And I'm not going to comment on New York's bail laws, but the fact of the matter is that it, notwithstanding the outstanding prosecutors of the DA's office, it is more difficult for them to have defendants arrested of gun arrests who are charged stateside to keep them detained. Whereas on our side, we urge the magistrates to consider not only the risk of flight, but also the danger that these individuals pose to the community. And as a result, we have been able to keep, I say we, law enforcement has been able to charge more individuals and successfully urge the judges to keep them detained pending arrest. What has that meant? There are less gun offenders on the street, able to commit more crimes. The community is beginning to realize that, in fact, maybe something is being done, and officers are feeling better about the arrests that they're making. In addition to the charging decisions and the changes in that, we also changed how we do the timing of the intake. Again, rather than doing these weekly meetings, oftentimes days after the person had been arrested and since released, we're basically evaluating these cases real time. So an RPD officer, a uniformed officer on the streets of Rochester at 3 in the morning, makes a car stop, identifies an individual who has an illegal weapon. That officer will contact an ATF agent on duty, a federal agent from the ATF on duty. They will discuss the facts. The ATF agent will determine whether there is a federal case to be made there, whether there's federal jurisdictional facts necessary to charge somebody federally. And if they make that initial determination, they get past that screening, they will call us. And when I say us, I mean myself or Brett Harvey, who's the chair, who's the head of the Narcotics and Organized Crime Section. Sometimes these calls to ATF happen in the middle of the night on weekends, holidays, and sometimes their calls to us happen in the middle of the night on weekends and holidays. But we are able to make these decisions right away before the defendant is released from state custody. Now, I think it goes without saying that we don't charge people unless we have valid facts, we think we have admissible facts sufficient, not only to charge but to convict. But as a result of that program, as a result of that change in practice, we have charged over the last year approximately close to 100 defendants with gun crimes. And we have, I say we, the officers on the streets, the agents on the streets, ATF, FBI, HSI, DEA, Marshal Service, have taken over 100 firearms off the streets as well. As a result, we saw the trends going in our direction. Violence was dropping in the first half of the year, and we are here to do what we can to hopefully keep that trend going. I should note in a few important points before I close. First, in discussing criminal charges, we must always remember that all persons are deemed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Second, that while we have seen reductions in the first half of the year in the number of gun violence, the volume of gun violence in the Rochester area, a single shooting is one too many. And as you know, there has been a recent spike in shootings in this city. This press conference is to report, not to congratulate. We must continue to work together and remain committed to target gun violence every day, day and night. And finally, very importantly, it should go without saying, but I will say it again, none of these initiatives, arrests, charges, successes are possible without the brave and dangerous work of the men and women of law enforcement. This community knows too well the dangerous conditions that these men and women work in and day out. They literally put their lives on the line for our community, for us, and for our children. We are indebted to their service, and we are indebted to their commitment. Thank you. Jen.
Thank you, Andy. That overview is a process, as Andy said, that we put in place in this office when the crime and the violence in this community spiked to the point where the mayor had to call a state of emergency. We have been and we will continue to modify our strategy and our plan as necessary to ensure that the trend of crime violence in this community continues to go down. Now, to put a fine point on what Andy has said about what we've been able to do over the past 6 months or so in decreasing the crime rate in the Rochester area, I want to highlight one of the cases that resulted in many arrests that we believe has helped to decrease the crime rate. And with that, I want to call Assistant United States Attorney Doug Gregory to the podium to talk about that case.
Last summer certainly was extremely violent, causing law enforcement to come up with different strategies to attack the violence. One particular area of concern was a feud that had begun to develop between two groups here in the city of Rochester on the east side and the northeast side. The two groups, for reasons that are largely unknown, probably not all that important, began feuding with each other. On one side, you had an individual by the name of Brandon Washington, goes by the name of BMAC, and all of his associates. They ran drug trafficking houses on the east side of the city of Rochester. They were well armed, well equipped to defend their property, their proceeds, and their product. During the course of their selling out of these various houses here in the city of Rochester, a feud developed with a rival gang, a Bloods gang. We haven't normally seen Bloods here in the city of Rochester. I've been doing this for 29 years, and it's the first verified group of Bloods that we saw here in the city of Rochester. The head of that Bloods group was an individual by the name of Rasheem Sullivan, otherwise known as Coop. Rasheem Sullivan and Brandon Washington did not get along very well, and the two sides began feuding throughout the course of last summer. During the course of their feud, it included drive-by shootings, arsons of each other's properties, shoot-ups of the front windows of the drug locations where they were trying to make money, and unfortunately, homicides occurred as well during the course of this feud. mid-July of 2022, 2 individuals were shot on North Clinton Avenue that were allegedly part of the Rasheem Sullivan side, and 3 individuals have since been arrested for that case and are being prosecuted by the Monroe County District Attorney's Office. In the aftermath of that shooting, there were several more drive-by shootings and at least 2 arsons that occurred. On July 21st of 2022, RPD officers, investigators, essentially fed up with this feud between these 2 individuals and the violence that was occurring, began to clamp down, and surveillance was set up at the corner of Laser Street and Bauman Street in the city of Rochester. 2 investigators, Investigator Anthony Mazurkowitz and Investigator Sino Sang, were inside a van conducting surveillance on the Brandon, Washington side of this case. An associate of Brandon, Washington, Kelvin Vickers, who is now being prosecuted by the Monroe County District Attorney's Office, slithered down the street and opened fire into that van, killing Investigator Mazurkowitz. Obviously, this put a fine point on the violence that was occurring in the city of Rochester. And in part and parcel with the U.S. Attorney and the District Attorney's Office, we made a conscious decision to go after both of these groups. In September of 2022, numerous arrests were made on the Brandon, Washington side, including Brandon Washington himself and his associates. They have all been held without bail in federal court and charged with various crimes. Just last week, a grand jury sitting here in the Western District of New York returned a 10-count indictment against Brandon Washington, Diedrich Fulwiley, Derek Steele, and Jermel Washington, charging them with various narcotics charges, as well as weapons charges, as well as possessing a firearm which is considered a machine gun under federal law. Mr. Washington was arraigned last week. Mr. Fulwiley, Mr. Steele, and Jermel Washington were arraigned approximately 2 hours ago before Judge Peterson, and their cases are now pending. After arresting the Brandon, Washington side of the investigation, we turned our sights on Mr. Sullivan, Rasheem Sullivan, and his crew. And in December of 2022, we arrested Mr. Sullivan and 8 of his associates with various narcotics and weapons-related charges, and their cases are also pending here in federal court. Nearly every one of those individuals was also held without bail, including Rasheem Sullivan, who, after a detention hearing here in federal court last week, was detained by Judge Peterson on a finding that he was a danger to the community. We're working very hard to eliminate these types of groups and to make sure that this summer we don't have those types of feuds. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. So I hope you're getting the flavor of what's happening in the United States Attorney's Office working with our law enforcement partners. And the flavor that I want to go out to people in the community who think they can terrorize communities and not allow people to leave their house and enjoy the summer is don't. Don't do it. I have men and women in the United States Attorney's Office, as you heard from Andy Rodriguez, working day, night, holidays, weekends, and everything in between to make sure when these shootings happen, my office is ready to accept proper cases. You heard Andy say ATF is out there working with RPD to ensure in real time that when these incidents happen, we are ready to go, and we will, and we have. Now, through the good work of the men and women in my office, especially AUSA Gregory, AUSA Rodriguez, and all the other people working on this, we realized this was a crisis situation and a critical moment. That critical moment has not ended because the trending of shootings has gone down over the last 6 or so months. We will continue to work with our law enforcement partners to take the people who are committing havoc in our communities off the streets so people do not have to fear for their lives or the lives of their loved ones. And with that, I want to call up the representative from ATF to talk a little bit about what their agency is doing to help us in this initiative.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian DiGirolamo. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for ATF. I give the U.S. Attorney, Attorney Ross, a lot of credit here because when the situation got bad, she rallied us all together. And I think that everybody in this room has a very valuable part to this. You know, ATF, we concentrate on our crime gun intelligence and using that to promote our violent crime reduction strategy. And here is a model in New York State. This city, Rochester, is a model for the rest of the state. We are very fortunate here because we have a very good foundation of a law enforcement community that has been working together. We have a U.S. attorney who's aggressive and looking to address the violent crime. We have a district attorney who's working with us to address violent crime as well. We have the Violent Crime Task Force here at ATF, in which we're out here targeting the violent crime, the trigger pullers. And we have all our local partners. And when the U.S. Attorney called us all together, we all looked at it. We used our Monroe County Crime Analysis Center, analyzing all the data that we had, and everybody in this room rallied together and took a portion of the workload and carried it forward. If we don't have these partnerships here, if this relationship hasn't been established before, and we don't have the support of everybody in this room, this initiative doesn't happen. And I'm pushing this in every city across the state. I want to use Rochester as a model. And I hope that with the support of the U.S. Attorney and the District Attorney and all our partners here, that we can continue this throughout the state and have more success stories like we've had here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me say this. We have been successful, but success is momentary, and we will be vigilant to continue that success, right? So this is a moment in time, and like Andy said, we're not here to congratulate. We're here to report out what we've been doing for this community. But success will continue only if we continue to work together as we have and continue to modify our strategy as needed, and that's what we're all here to do. I'm very honored to be working with the men and women of the local, state, and federal law enforcement on this initiative because we can see the results and the progress from our hard work in coming together in our collaboration. And with that, I would like to call up the Chief of Police of Rochester Police Department.
Thank you. And thank you to the U.S. Attorney's Office for their work in prosecuting and indicting Brandon Washington and his crew, for the reign of terror in the city of Rochester, which included the murder of Officer Mazurkowicz. Our expanded partnership with the ATF began about a year ago. We really began to see results, I think, in October of last year, is when we started to see things trending down. In that year, over 90 weapons cases have been selected for federal prosecution. Thank you to the ATF for providing an on-call agent 24/7 to review cases. I believe first, not only in the state, but I think in the country to do that. Thank you to the U.S. Attorney's Office for partnering with us to prosecute this huge increase in federal cases. And thanks to the hard work of the men and women of the RPD. I say that all the time. You'd think I could say it right. Thanks to the hard work of the men and women of the RPD, we recovered over 800 firearms from our streets last year, almost 400 so far this year. A few weeks ago, when I looked at the numbers, we had 209 criminal possession of weapons cases just at the state level, not including what we were sending over the federal level by now. I'm sure it's easily 250 criminal possession of weapons cases this year alone. Shooting victims are down roughly 50% from last year. But again, any victim is one victim too many. We do know we have a lot of work to do, and there has been a recent uptick in the past few weeks, as we've seen. Our homicide victims are down roughly 1/3 from last year, which, there are obvious two benefits to that. We have more members of our community that are still here with us, but The workload has allowed major crimes to focus on some of the older cases, some of the colder cases that they needed to work on. So remember, although we keep track of homicide stats by year, when it becomes the new year, those unsolved cases don't go away. They build up, they build up, they build up. So major crimes, thanks to a little bit of a slowdown this year, has been able to go back and close some more 2022 cases as their workload has decreased. We're going to continue these partnerships to bring accountability to those that bring violence to our community. Our new anti-violence unit is up and running. It's in its early stages. We plan on increasing it, but they're going to be out there, again, targeting our top gun offenders. This has never been, nor will it ever be, blanket police work where we take over a street and we simply think we solve the problem by writing tickets to the residents on the street. This is data-driven, thanks to the Crime Analysis Center, intelligence-driven, and we look at our top offenders, we arrest them, and if possible, we prosecute them federally. We've had great success, and I'm sure this summer's just going to show how great this is as we continue to reduce violence in Rochester. Again, thank you to all the partners here in the room. I can't say enough about how much we valued your assistance, especially last summer with the loss of our brother officer.
All right, thank you, Chief. I just want to end by saying, of course, AUSA Gregory mentioned all the arrests and the indictments of certain individuals. They are innocent until proven guilty. We intend to do that. So with that, I will open it up for questions. Sir?
Yeah, just a quick question. So the main point going across here is that, timing of intake, what you're announcing is that officers will contact ATF on duty to determine if a federal case should be made in order to keep that defendant in custody. Is that one of the main takeaways here in trying keeping people off the streets?
We are trying to keep the most dangerous offenders off the street. We're not trying to keep just general people in custody. We're going through the process when the case qualifies to be charged federally, and we open a case and we take the case at the United States Attorney's Office. A determination is made whether or not a motion should be made to detain that person, as AUSA Rodriguez said, as a danger to the community or a risk of flight.
And last follow-up question, is that a new measure that's being taken or something that's been going on?
It's normal. We do this in all, especially violent crime cases. We make a determination if we should ask the judge to detain that person as the case is proceeding through the system, because they could be a danger to other people.
And whomever can answer this, one, can we just talk about the success of this federal indictment against Brandon, Diedrich, Derek, and Dramel, as well as this an example of these federal charges going along with the findings of the gun?
I'm going to let Doug respond.
Can I just clarify your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you asking whether or not we view the arrest and prosecution of these individuals as a success?
How successful do you see this? One, the success of this, and then two, is this an example of the federal charges we're kind of talking about here that started what sounds like a year ago here in Rochester, where the partnership and the ATF and things of that?
The prosecution of Brandon Washington is a success at this point and up until this point, because he was, in the summer of 2022, one of the most violent offenders we had. Obviously, there are a number of violent offenders here in the city of Rochester, but the feud that was going on between Brandon Washington and Rasheem Sullivan was affecting innocent people. Drive-by shootings, arsons at family members' houses. They met the definition of danger to the community more than any two individuals that I can think of in recent memory. If those two people were in another case, we would be moving to detain those individuals as well. If they present a danger to the community, to others on the streets, obviously drive-by shootings, bullets have no names. Innocent people could be involved. We want those individuals removed from the streets. Now, we're a long way from convicting these individuals, and as the U.S. Attorney indicated, they're innocent until proven guilty. But a grand jury has returned an indictment against those individuals, finding that there is probable cause to support the 10 charges which are alleged in that indictment, and we will continue to build our proof as we make our way towards trial in order to convict these individuals of those charges. Does that answer your question?
Yep, sure does. Thank you. And then I have another question too, if it comes back to my mind, dang it. Jeez Louise, a lot of information coming at me. Oh my gosh, let's go for it.
We can circle back.
Yeah,
We'll circle
thank
back.
you.
Just for takeaways for people watching this who have noticed the increase in the shootings here in the city of Rochester, while you all have acknowledged that the gun violence is down, statistically through the year, we've obviously noticed this spike. So what is being done? What could you tell the viewers? What is specifically being done to address these situations different than what has been happening prior to this?
So let me start by saying I won't get into specifics because that's law enforcement sensitive, and if we tell the specifics, then the people who are doing the shootings will know exactly what we're doing. But what I will say is that we are reconvening. We are looking at what is going well and will continue to go well. We will determine what we need to modify to address those issues. And what I do want the people watching this to know is that we are thinking about this, as you heard, 24/7. We have agents available 24/7. We have our good men and women of RPD out there 24/7. And I have AUSAs on call 24/7 to take those calls. We're not stopping and we're not static. We will modify our approach as many times as we need to ensure that this uptick that we're seeing in the past few weeks levels out.
Circle back.
Okay,
Found it.
circling back.
So when it comes down to the ATF, so point A, police find someone with the possession of a weapon. They call ATF. Hey ATF, you found the weapon. What is the success, or what is the rate or chances of this person being federally charged? Is it a person with a handgun that was just let out of prison, and that's a federal, so we're going to put them into jail until their court hearing? What does that look like?
I'm going to let Andy take that question.
Well, of course, it depends on the circumstances and it depends on the facts. Sometimes an RPD officer will reach out to ATF in the middle of the night. There's a gun in custody. A defendant has been arrested. Is this a case that can be charged federally? ATF will evaluate the case. We can't charge every gun crime federally. That's just not the way the federal gun laws work. So they will evaluate the case. One, is there a charge? Sometimes it's a felon in possession charge. It is a federal crime for somebody who has been previously convicted of a felony to possess a firearm. When the officers run the person and identify that that person is a convicted felon, they will reach out to the ATF. ATF will evaluate the gun to determine whether it's a gun that can be charged federally. Not all guns can be charged federally. There has to have been manufactured outside the state of New York. If they make that determination and there is a valid federal case, then they will reach out to us and we will determine the case. We don't take every case federally. There are some cases that are best prosecuted by the Monroe County District Attorney's Office because there are additional charges. For example, somebody who's been involved in a shooting who has a gun. Oftentimes the DA's office is best positioned to prosecute those cases because they will prosecute the shooting in conjunction with the criminal possession of a firearm. So it depends. It depends on the circumstances and it depends on the particulars of the case.
So more or less, kind of what I'm hearing from this is it's a pick and choose. So, for example, just recently a guy gets out of prison, serving 12 years after disfiguring a woman, found with a gun, gets taken in but let go, and it posts on social media the other day that he has a gun again. So I guess for me, what's a danger, what's not a danger? I guess that's the bigger question here. And how do you pick and choose who you take in federally? I guess that's what I'm confused on.
Everything is a pick and choose, right? Like Andy said, we can't take every case of a person with a gun. What we are looking at, as was reported here today, are the most dangerous people out there. Because if you take one person who's doing 50% of the shootings off the street, you've just potentially lowered the crime rate by 50%, right? That's just math. So what we're doing is trying to have a major impact with the resources that we have to take the most dangerous individuals off the street. Those are the ones like the Brandon Washington and the ones, his associates who were just indicted. In the case that you're speaking about, we are working and partnering with, as you heard, the Monroe County District Attorney's Office. Because between my office and that office, we should be able to really make an impact. And as we stated, we were making that impact. The statistics show that. So in a situation like that, you know, we monitor the situation and we are determining in a real-time basis what people who are committing these crimes, who have these guns, should come to our office for prosecution, and which of those individuals should go to the Monroe County District Attorney's Office for those prosecutions. But anybody who has a gun, who shouldn't have a gun, they're a felon in possession, they've gotten the gun illegally, they're not doing the paperwork correctly, they're lying, they're straw purchasers, all those people are in our sights. We are watching them, we are looking at them, we are monitoring them, and when the time comes, if there's a prosecution to be had, an arrest is made, we're looking to prosecute them.
And is that the purpose of this press conference today, is to reinforce the existing rules or existing procedures that are in place, or to announce a new or specific change in procedure? Are you addressing the community at large about the issue of gun violence, or is there something specific that is changing today that they should know about?
Well, what's changing today is that we will modify our approach to address any of the new issues which our previous approach are not addressing. The purpose of this conference is to announce the summer anti-crime initiative that this office and our partners are working together to ensure to the community that we want them to have a safe summer, and we want people who are going to limit that or inhibit that to know that we're here to look at them, to take them off the streets, so law-abiding citizens in the city of Rochester and the greater Rochester area do not have to worry about their summer, about going out, about being at the parks, about having cookouts, about having parties, all the things summer should be about, right? When I was a kid and I grew up in the inner city, that's what summer was about. I didn't have to worry back then about someone coming and shooting at somebody else in the park maybe I didn't even know, and me or my loved one being shot. We are here to make sure that the citizens of the greater Rochester area know we are partnering together. We have been, we will continue to. We will have a strategy. We will change the strategy as needed to ensure that at least they have the opportunity to enjoy their lives without fear of harm.
One more question? Anybody? Okay. Thank you.
Can I just do one more really quick? Could we see any more additional help for police officers and deputies? We already know they're partnering together to address the violence. Could we see even more boots on the ground when addressing the violence, being out in patrols, being out in the community to ensure that these things aren't happening, even though, you know, sometimes people just don't care?
I think Chief Smith has already announced there's a new initiative at RPD, but do you want to address that question?
Yeah, well, so, and this leads back to the other question, to a lot of our anti-violence efforts, because of our staffing, is done on overtime. Overtime comes at a cost, both financially and for the well-being of the officers. For those reasons, again, we have to pick and choose when are we going to use this overtime, when are we going to have these officers work. You know, January, February, March, traditionally the slower months, the colder months, we had backed off some by necessity in the anti-violence details. We have now, the past 30 days, ramped them back up. So we are staffing the details, we are spending the overtime, we're back doing what we were doing in the warmer months last year. But by design, because of staffing and human limitations, we cannot do it 365 days a year.
Yeah, no, I was just seeing if there's going to be additional help, like from the Department of Justice. We see that come down the pipeline of state troopers coming in more, other counties coming in. That's what I'm asking.
So the state troopers partner with us. They continue to. Right now they're lending us a big hand on the ATV details, but they also do participate in our anti-violence details, as does the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. The other part to that is, you know, we have to answer 911 calls. That's our bread and butter. That's what we're here to do. There have been a few incidents this year where it got to the point where we simply knew we were saturated, we were done. We reached out to the sheriff's office. The sheriff sent some deputies in to help us with the calls for service loads. So we are constantly monitoring that, and when we have the need and they're available, we do reach out to our partners. Again, we wouldn't be able to do any of this without them.
And I guess let me just follow up. We surge when we need to, and that's how this initiative started. Part of law enforcement is surging to take the violent crime, to take this situation down, and then we can level it out and staff it normally. So the answer is yes.